Welcome to another episode of the Ghosts of Somerville. In today's story, we visit the historic property, the old Dutch Parsonage. And like any other vintage old home, there's been many families and people who have lived there through the years. Well, apparently, someone or something may still.
The evolution of the position over at the Wallace House has changed over years. They used to have caretakers up until 1977, I believe it was, and finally they professionalized the position. The caretakers were very nice people who lived on the property for basically free and cleaned the houses and had a sheet of paper that they memorized and told old, worn out, and half correct stories about the house. I really don't want to put them down. Some of them were very nice people. But the first museum professional was hired in 1977, a guy named Tom Laverty, who is still living in New Jersey over by Highlands. But that was my position. And the title was something like Historic Preservation Specialist at first, and then they kept changing job titles until they sounded like nothing that anybody would recognize. But I've spent my whole career working in 18th century houses and museums. I worked down in Virginia at a place called Gunston Hall, at the big plantation down there, the home of George Mason. Then after that, I had a short stint with the National Park Service, and then the Wallace House job opened up. And I actually had worked there part-time years before, but the full-time position opened, and I was very happy to take it. It meant moving back to Somerset County, which is where I'm from, and it also, gave me the opportunity to work with two Georgian houses, which is my area of focus when it comes to architecture.
Okay, and the old Dutch Parsonage, which is part of the property or
the complex.
The
yeah.
complex.
Mm-hmm.
And how long? So you worked there how many years?
About 32 years.
32 years.
Yeah.
So I guess what everybody wants to know, over the course of the 32 years, anything?
Spectral activity. Yeah, I mean the house. By the time I got there, had a fairly loosely but convincing history of having unusual behavior. Not the Wallace House, and there are some people who think, oh yeah, the Wallace House is haunted. There's absolutely nothing to suggest that. However, the Dutch Parsonage is another story. It had, years of history of people thinking they felt things, they saw things, and hearing things. There had been quite a history of footsteps being heard in the house, particularly on the second floor. Women walking in and getting the heebie-jeebies, for lack of a better term, getting a very frightened feeling, a very uncomfortable feeling. And it was in the late 1970s that the gentleman I mentioned before, Tom Laverty, took the job, and he was persuaded by a ghost hunter, fairly reputable guy, and now considered one of the first generation of ghost hunters, Al Rauber. He persuaded Tom to come, to let him go through the house and investigate it, and even bring a psychic in. Now, Tom was a very skeptical guy, which I think is to his credit. He wasn't sure what to make of any of this stuff, and kind of, I think, had a wry smile on his face when the whole thing was going on. But the psychic came in to the house, which was built, by the way, in 1751. That might be an important component of this. Anyway, she walked through the house, feeling the walls and making little remarks now and then. And at the end of it all, she came up with the conclusion that the house was haunted by a young male servant.
You're going to have to allow me a moment. A lot has happened here in this house. Oh, very quickly, I'm seeing a young person, a young male. He's very upset. He's okay. He said there was a change forced upon him that he was not ready for. He's telling me, no, don't make me go. Something that may have seemed trivial to others but was very important to him, and he did not want to go. He's telling me to feel the walls. He's telling me the walls, the room, something to do with the room. He didn't want to change his room. Someone is to blame. Someone is to blame for this change. I'm trying to give him some comfort so he speaks to me more. He's telling me it's also with the letter M. M. Moving. M. Someone's name. Okay, he's saying her. Someone's name with the letter M forced him to move.
However, this was, according to her, someone who occupied the house with the owners in the 19th century, not back in the 1750s when the house was constructed. And she said that the young male servant had a problem with women, and in particular, in whose name the letter M played a prominent role. Now, what's interesting about this is that Dr. Peter Stryker, who lived there from 1810 through 1836, was married twice. And the first wife was a Maria Mercer Stryker, and the second one was a Mary Magdalena Stryker. So there's M to the fourth power right there. According to the psychic,
A male servant, and he's upset. He's angry. He said something. He was forced to do something he didn't want to do. He just keeps saying no, no. I won't go. He's telling me I won't go.
The young male servant was angry about something what most of us would consider rather trivial, and Al Rauber, the investigator, said that was often the case. I wouldn't necessarily know, but the young male servant evidently had been asked to move from one room in the house to another. That was the extent of the crime against him, so to speak.
You're no longer welcome here. Now leave.
And anyway, from that moment on, it was an unresolved issue, and hence the footsteps of this, what we assume was this young male servant, would go back and forth on the second floor, go down out into the passage, and down the steps, and then stop on a landing. The fact is, I was party to a couple of experiences involving not myself, but other people who perceive these things. I was working with an alarm contractor once. It was actually a day that we were closed, but in order to expedite things, I went over with the contractor to get the work done as soon as possible, and that meant giving up a day off. That wasn't that big a deal, but he was working up in the garret, or what we would call the attic today, and putting in wires and things.
Do you think you see it? What needs to be done?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's probably gonna take him about, like, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. Then it's done.
It's not the biggest project we've had, but it is a little tricky. Make sure you know what you're looking at there first.
Yeah, I'm trying.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go out for lunch then. You want something?
No, I'm good, buddy. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate
We'll
it.
see you then.
Thanks.
Right around 11:45, I decided I was going to go to the local McDonald's. At that point in time, the McDonald's was over on Veterans Memorial Drive, and it was just a quick trip. I asked him if he wanted anything. He said no, he was on a very strict diet, and he didn't want anything, but he thanked me. So I went out the door to get my bag of hamburgers and things to go and bring back to the house.
Yo, Jim, is that you? Jim, you back? Jim, you back already? Hello? Yo, Jim! Is that you?
When I got back to the Dutch parsonage, he was annoyed with me. And he was annoyed with me because he heard me walking around on the second floor, and he was talking to me and I wouldn't answer him.
Where'd you go? I was just talking to you.
Me? I wasn't here. I was out to lunch.
You were just upstairs. I was just talking to you.
There's nobody
You didn't
else
answer
in the
me, but-
house.
Oh, no.
What exactly do you think you heard?
I know what I heard. Heard somebody walking around. I thought it was you. I thought you
You
came
heard
back.
footsteps.
Yes, I did.
And I said, "Where did you hear this exactly?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I just heard you walking back and forth down, on the second floor and around the stairs." And I said, "That's really interesting, because I just got back and the door was closed. There was nobody in the house, and I made sure it was locked. For one thing, we were supposed to be closed, and second of all, it was certainly a security issue. Well, I told him that what he heard had actually jived, so to speak, with what other people had heard in the past with the footsteps. And at that point, he took a renewed interest in the house. And, he had a little bit more respect for what he was hearing. I think from then on, any noise he heard in the house, he thought was a ghost. That same thing happened back in the 70s, even before Tom Laverty was there. This is back when they did have caretakers there. And it was another day when the house was closed, and the oil-burning furnace in the cellar had broken. And a maintenance man and, the superintendent, and who would be my boss, he would be like one step above, and a law enforcement ranger were in the house to take a look at the malfunctioning oil-burning furnace. They were down in the cellar when they heard the footsteps up on the second floor.
Because it was here that... There it is again.
And same pattern. They went back and forth.
I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Aren't you closed?
Yeah, I mean... It sounds like somebody's walking.
Right.
And they came down the steps and stopped. Well, when the two of them were in the cellar and heard the footsteps, they thought somebody had walked into the house accidentally, and they started calling out, may I help you? Hello? And there was no response. And it got to the point where they thought they might have had an intruder.
This is all locked up. It's been locked up.
Nothing.
It was right here. I mean, he was like walking around in this area right here. Maybe it went upstairs, I don't know. We're closed.
Hello? You need to come out now.
The ranger had his hand on his gun, and they got to the bottom of the steps, and the footsteps stopped right in front of them. Rather convincing, I'd say. And 2 years later, although the guy would probably not admit it, he was still afraid of the house.
So it seems like it's the same. It's the same
cycle.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the same cycle. The footsteps going back and forth,
And then ending at the.
going down the steps and stopping on the landing.
Huh.
Yeah. It was very interesting to be with someone when they actually saw an entity in the house. I don't pretend to have any psychic powers. There were a couple times when I felt things and that I didn't want, and it turned out that my instincts, such as they were sort of correct. That's another story about another house at another time, but I was, one of the things that we did regularly, and in my mind, the most important thing was giving tours, because that's what the public perceives. You're the first front line that the public sees when they come to visit a house, and their impression of the place will be made or broken by what you do with them. Anyway, I had a mother and a daughter on a very hot summer day, and as usual, we began in the Wallace house, and then afterwards came over to see the Dutch parsonage. Summer was a very slow time Because Somerville itself was not actually a summer destination. We had much more visitation during the spring, winter, and the fall as well. So I remember these people very well. They got to the second floor of the Dutch parsonage, and we went into the area that was allegedly haunted, where all these footsteps were heard and all the other activity took place. And the little girl, who was 5 years old, suddenly freaked out. She said, she told her mother she wanted to get out of the room, and the mother looked at me, and I looked at her, and she said, "Okay, dear." We went out into the passage. We didn't have to go far, and the girl was much calmer. And I said to the mother on the side, "Has this ever happened to her before?" And the mother said, "Yes, is this place supposedly?" And I said, "Yes, it is supposedly." We didn't use the H word, haunted. She said, "Yeah." She said, "Wherever we go, and there's allegedly some type of spectral activity, the girl was almost certain to pick up on it." Well, we got outside, and I told the mother a little bit about the history of, such as it was, of the hauntings of the house. And we moved onward and changed the subject for the sake of the little girl. Well, I got a phone call from her probably about 2 weeks later, and she told me that they were making cookies one day in the house, and she just very casually brought up the subject of what happened in the Dutch parsonage. And the little girl told her that what she saw or perceived was a man-boy. I guess I would have a slash there, man-boy. So young man, we're interpreting this as being. And he was angry and sad.
Hey, Mama.
Yeah.
Remember when we went by that old house?
Yes, what about it?
Well, I saw a man boy and he was upset and sad.
Really?
So there's a type of melancholy a description from a 5-year-old girl about this entity, if you will. And I found that to be very interesting. And of course it knitted in nicely with what the psychic had said.
Go ahead, tell me who you are and what we're doing.
Okay. My name is Jenny Colucci. I'm a paranormal investigator with Parasite Investigations. I'm also a Somerville resident for the past 26 years. I have been to the old Dutch parsonage. I have toured it. It's an incredible treasure in our community. I was very privileged to tour it. And I have heard the stories about its hauntings. And when I did, I had a very specific reaction. It was this. To me, the stories based on the psychic in the 1970s and her experience were so typical of what we call historical or residual haunting, also sometimes known as place memory. So back in the 1960s, someone came up with a theory called the stone tape theory, and that is that energy can be trapped in objects or places. So to me, it's very typical because it's repetitive, the activity she describes. So for example, she hears footsteps walking around upstairs and says it's a young male servant, and who actually comes down the stairs and stops at a certain stair. Now, it's always the same. That's very typical of a residual haunting. Always the same, over and over, repeating, repeating, repeating. However, the conditions have to be right. Now, it doesn't mean that something was tragic. It doesn't mean that something was terrible that happened, and a lot of people have that impression. It has to be a tragedy that gets imprinted. It can be something very everyday that happens. So this could be that this servant every day woke up, maybe made the bed, walked around the bed, walked downstairs, and this just repeats as a memory. Now, they're not actually intelligent hauntings, so you can't communicate with this entity, for example. There's nothing you can do to get rid of it other than to get rid of what it's imprinted in. For example, if it's the bed holding the memory, you'd have to remove the bed. If it's the limestone, the quartz, the iron, which are typical things that would hold memory. You'd have to remove those actually from the premises. It's very difficult to do. And in my opinion, why would you do it in a historical place like that? Why would you ever take that memory away? No one's being hurt. This servant is not actually reliving this. It's not a person. It's just a memory. It's like a cassette tape or a movie playing over and over again. So to me, it's a lovely part of the history of the building, and why wouldn't you preserve that living history around you?
So you don't, it's not, you wouldn't be afraid of it.
Absolutely not.
But you could see someone would be, because they'd be like, what is this? I hear it right in front of me.
I have a very good example of that. So one of the things we talk about is ghosts walking through walls. And that is another example of place memory, because the wall used to be somewhere else. So this entity, this memory, is just walking through where he or she used to always walk through. So to us, it looks like someone's walking through a wall. How frightening. But to them, they're just walking on the same floor they always walked on.
Do you run into things like this all the time?
Definitely. All the time.
Okay.
All the time. It can be something as simple as your uncle came home every day at 5 o'clock and opened the front door and walked up the stairs. And every day at 5 o'clock, you may hear those noises. Interestingly, you don't actually have the door open and close. You just hear the sound of a door opening and closing and some footsteps, and that's it. It's not your uncle. You can't talk to him, unfortunately, in some cases, because again, the disadvantage is you can't get rid of it.
So is it spirit?
It's not. It's simply energy that is trapped.
Have you ever been to any of these where something was off, or say frightening, or something that was creepy?
Right. So I have had residual hauntings be creepy because of what I explained before about the floating. It looks like something is floating up the stairs, but really the stairs weren't there before, or we're in a different place. So it looks like they're floating, but that's not the case. Or half a person, right? Could be the floor was in a different spot or something like that. And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, to have someone say, oh, I'm seeing, half a person coming through a wall. But it's just the case that the wall wasn't there before.
So energy, not spirit.
No.
And then when the psychic would, like if someone like a psychic would say, no, that's a haunting, it's a ghost, it's a spirit, how does the two, you're almost like the science part of it.
Definitely.
So how do you handle the other side of the paranormal side of the person who says, you're wrong, it's this, it's a ghost, it's a real spirit that talks to you or wants to talk to you, and then they do the seances or Ouija boards, that side of it. How do you handle that?
Well, there are different types of hauntings, and one of them is an intelligent haunting where you can communicate with an entity.
Ah, okay.
So that is, there are several types of hauntings. That's one of them. So there are ways to determine that, obviously. You can use recordings, electronic voice phenomena. You can try and talk to them, record them on a digital recorder. And you can also use other equipment to try to communicate. And if you get intelligent responses, for example, Uncle George, is that you? Yes. And you actually can determine that it was your Uncle George coming in the door. That's a little bit different.
So we have the repetitive energy.
Mm-hmm.
We have the intelligent haunting,
Mm-hmm.
which is the actual ghost.
Right.
And you said is there another one? You said there were several.
Yeah. In my opinion, there are 4. There's also a poltergeist.
Okay.
Which is a human-caused haunting. A lot of people think of it as like on TV, a poltergeist, things flying everywhere, but it's not caused by a ghost, it's caused by a human, a living human. So for example, if I'm angry and the lights start to flicker, that's poltergeist activity.
Oh, okay. And so that's 3.
Uh-huh.
What's the next one?
People also consider demonic hauntings as a type.
this came up again another time, and probably the last time, when I had a visit from a friend whose father was a Lutheran minister. Again, on a I guess it was a summer day or an autumn day, I don't remember. They were killing time while there was a bridal shower going on. The young man was getting married, and they came to the Wallace house and the Dutch parsonage. Well, we went through the Wallace house, of course, and then we got to the Dutch parsonage, and we got up to the second floor, and I watched the minister, who also had another adult friend with him, or older friend, I should say. And I watched him visibly shiver, and he went like this, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, tell me, does anything funny ever happen in this room, or has anything unusual ever been perceived?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you feeling something?" And he said, "Oh yeah." And then I said, "Come with me," and I walked him over to the corner where the little girl had met her entity, and I said, what do you feel here?" And he said, "It's much stronger here." I said, "Okay," and we walked into another room and we discussed it, and I said, the story has been that there's this young servant who walks back and forth and goes down the stairs. And he said, "Oh, uh-huh." And he turned to his friend. He said, "Hey, Al, remember that one we cleaned out by the shore last year?" And I said, wait a minute, you cleaned out? You do this type of thing?" And he said, "Well, yeah, in my line of work, we do deal with the spiritual world." And I said, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense." He said, "Why? Would you like me to get rid of this?" And I stood there going, And he said, you really should if you can." And I said, "Okay." And I had heard this before. Ghost hunting is not actually an exact science. In spite of what we see on television, I think there's a lot to be learned, and there are a lot of gray areas. But he said, "Let's go in the other room where we were when he felt the strongest presence of the entity." And he spoke to this thing through prayer for about 5 minutes or so. And then he said, "That's it, it's gone." And I said, "What? That's it?" I expected the swirling whirlwinds of darkness and the bleeding doorknobs and the walls pulsating and all that stuff. But he said, "Yeah, it's gone." And he said to me, he said, we're dealing with an entity that may be demonic," and he said is almost certain demonic in nature. He said that's what I felt, and he said something that I'd heard other times, that these are demons that take on the identities of people who had lived the past or the dead, and try to win our confidence and friendship when they're really up to no good. And since then, I've studied the Bible more on it to see what the Bible says. The Bible's thousands of years old, so I think it's a pretty good source. But he what he said, as far as this thing being malevolent, seemed to make some sense, because there had been people I knew who had gone into the house over the years and felt threatened. It was a threatening, dark presence. One of these women came back and she said, "This place feels completely different after that happened." So it was pretty convincing. It was pretty convincing.
So what we do is we have two cameras. We have a camera A and we have a camera B, and for different angles. So, of course, this is always a good backup, and also audio. We'll have. I had Jim wired, and I also had an external microphone, which is out of the shot. he starts talking about the demon part.
We're dealing with an entity that may be demonic, and he said is almost certain demonic in nature. He said that's what I felt.
And all of a sudden, my camera goes out. Okay, now the battery died, which shouldn't have happened, but that should not have happened. However, that happens. No problem. The other camera's rolling. So I get up. I go to change the battery, keep talking. And I figure, well, no problem. I'll just cut to that camera, in that part and use the audio. So I get in the lab, in the editing room, and I get right to that point, and there's no footage of either cameras. That camera was out. This camera was still rolling. It didn't stop, but there's a blank space at the same time. So that really freaked me out, but as I went back to edit the footage thinking, okay, that's a really freaky story, I paid attention to what he was saying. He says in that moment that the Lutheran minister was saying that this is where he felt the strongest presence of the entity. He felt the strongest presence. At that moment, I have this issue. Here's the original footage without the B-roll to cover the missing part, and you will see what happens and what Jim is actually saying during that moment.
Really should if you can. And I said, okay. And I had heard this before. Ghost hunting is not actually an exact science. In spite of what we see on television, I think there's a lot to be learned, and there are a lot of gray areas. But he said, let's go in the other room where we were when he felt the strongest presence of the entity. And he spoke to this thing through prayer for about 5 minutes or so. And then he said, that's it, it's gone.
I can't explain that. The two cameras are not together in any way. They're not tethered. They're separate recording machines. Having them both, having just the one fail is rare, but happens. Having the two this one fails and this one not recording anything in that moment, exact same moment as this one failing, should never have happened. I cannot explain it. And then it fails at the same exact part of the description of the strongest part. I mean, the strongest place of the feeling of the entity. That I did not make this up. This really happened.
Right.
Which shouldn't. I still can't explain that.
It happens to us all the time.
But
all the time.
Oh, it does.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, what was that about?
Right. So one of the theories is that entities use the energy, batteries. They drain your batteries to use the energy.
But I'm also going to put that in there.
Absolutely, you
say,
should.
This is the original.
You should. Without having investigated this place, for all we know, there are intelligent entities there. This is haunted. This building.
And when they follow the story, this is what starts to get creepy.
Right.
So Jim is telling the story,
yes.
And it happens to me, and we're not on site.
Yes. It doesn't matter. I really think an intelligent haunt, it could work. It could happen. It could absolutely happen.
How else, how do I explain that?
We look, as investigators, we look for layers. So if we hear a sound, let's say I hear a voice. This happened to me recently. I heard a female voice in my ear pretty loudly. And at the same time, my K2 meter, which measures the EMF field, was going off like crazy. And then someone pulled out a camera. We call this structured light sensor camera. And it's kind of like an Xbox Kinect. Maps, looks like a skeleton. And we have a skeleton sitting right next to me in the chair. So we have 3 things happening at once, and that's what we look for, those type of layers. So you have 2 things happening. That's significant.
And now I still had the audio. I had separate audio working.
Okay.
So that's how I was able to go on.
I love that story. It's a great story.
It's a great story, right?
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like,
absolutely.
That was very strange. And it was very like odd that camera B still was spinning.
And not recording.
But there was no visual for the same amount of time. At the same exact time that camera A shut off.
And you were talking about the exorcism.
This was the demonic part.
Yeah, okay. To me, that's a great ghost story.
That's almost as, yeah.
And who doesn't love a good ghost story?
I'm sure that could be really creepy for you, especially.
Yes.
The electronics being wonky during investigations, during filmings, is not uncommon for both negative and human activity. I've done plenty of investigations where it's just human activity, where we've had our recorders constantly cut out, we've had batteries drain, cameras not work, change the batteries out, 2 minutes later batteries are dead again. So that is common with both types of activity. So, you know, the timing of that is really interesting. That has happened on many occasions in all different types of activity, including negative activity. Could have been something, or someone just didn't want you recording that.
And is it possible, since this was not on location, this was in my studio, so we're away from the property, is that something that could happen? Like, could it? Oh, it can.
Absolutely.
It follows Jim, or is it following the story?
It could be all of the above. I know I keep saying that, and I don't need to, because I'm not making light of things, but this is what becomes difficult, you know, in the paranormal world, with what are you actually dealing with? Because, you know, especially when it comes to negative activity, there are cases where things will follow people that are outside of that location. I have certainly experienced times where I was on a case that had negative activity, and I then at home would have things happening to me.
Really?
So it is certainly plausible. I don't want to say it is, because I don't want you to be freaked out, but you know, it is a possibility
that it followed him here.
Mm-hmm. It could just come to you because you're part of the project.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
I wouldn't worry about it.
No, I'm not worried about it. What I realized while doing this series is how much interesting history is right here in my own town. We tend to seek out points of interest and ignore what's right beneath our own feet. I was born in Somerville and now live a block away from the old Dutch. Yet it took a ghost story for me to finally get inside. Ironically, these stories of the dead may help keep alive the history for future generations to enjoy.
But ordinarily, I have had made a practice when I was working at the Wallace House in Dutch Parsonage of not bringing up these tales of the supernatural or unexplained, because unless somebody asked, if somebody inquired about it, I would bring it up. But and because it is part of the lore of the house, I won't call it the history, but I'll call it the lore. But the fact is, we have a number of problems at the house with people ghost hunting after hours, and the ghost hunting activities included breaking windows, breaking into the house. I had a number of people arrested over the years because of their curiosity, which often took on a more destructive mode than one would expect. But yeah, the reaction to the story of the Lutheran minister getting rid of the entity such as we know it was interesting, because a lot of people were angry with me for getting rid of this thing. Their view was, oh, if you have a ghost, wouldn't it be cool to keep it? Well, if in fact these are human spirits who are trapped and you have the means to release them, then by all means you should do it. And you know, I feel that way personally. And if in fact, if it was a demonic entity, it's not a matter of releasing, it's a matter of just expelling it, you know, as quickly as possible. But yeah, you know, people have told me, oh yes, we have a ghost, but we want to keep it. And I kept thinking to myself, that's one of the most selfish things I've ever heard in my life. But I can't tell other people what to do with their allegedly haunted houses.
Residual haunt? Intelligent? Spirit? Or demon? I suggest you come and visit the Old Dutch, and you might just find out for yourself. I'm Brian Vadum. I hope to see you again for another episode on the Ghosts of Somerville.
thing.
Yeah, what is the deal? What's the story?
They don't know.
They don't know?
It's just some like.
Are you the ghost?
A story about footsteps here at the old Dutch parsonage. And that makes me wonder what it could be that you heard.
Oh, I definitely heard footsteps.
Footsteps.
Someone was walking around, for sure.
That's an interesting story. Let me tell you a little bit more about that.
Yo, Jim! Is that you?
Yeah, this is weird, man.
Hello?
Beautiful. All right, good.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay. I could do it again and just change what I'm saying.
On Friday, little Richard ate 4 slices of pizza.
You made 4? You had 3.
It says the little caterpillar. No, this will be my 4th. What? 1, 2, 3, 4.